It is the 15th day of August 2011 on this Monday edition. And boy, am I glad to be here. I took off yesterday, had an excellent rebroadcast, some of it segments of our new InfoWars special reports that we're doing multiple times a week at PrisonPlanet.tv. So in a way, it wasn't a rebroadcast because much of yesterday's show had never been broadcast at all. But I almost called my producers and crew and came in yesterday, but I controlled myself and didn't. We have a very full plate of key information ahead of us, but the world is awakening. Now, just because you're awake doesn't mean that you know exactly where you're at, but it gives us that are awake a lot more than the general public a chance to show them and illustrate to them historically what's happening in its current context. So we have masses of news we're going to obviously be breaking down here coming up in the next segment. And we have no guest today. I told Jaron and others I don't want any guest. I want to be able to cover the news and take your phone calls on a host of issues. Number one, the system is running scared of Ron Paul and admits that they are censoring him. In fact, I saw it this morning and forgot to send it to Jaron, and I forget the exact headline, but we're going to dig it up. Once I can't find something, I start obsessing on it. I only had about 5 minutes to try to find it before showtime. It was a Politico headline. And it, oh, Jaron says he did find it. I don't know how you did that so quickly, Jaron. Oh, here it is. Tim Pawlenty, Michelle Bachmann clash at Republican debate. That's, you found one of them, but that's not it. It was a Politico headline that basically said, Bachmann, Pawlenty, come out as top contenders at debate. And then it just doesn't even mention Ron Paul that only lost by a couple hundred points, a couple hundred votes. And now it's admitted that Michelle Bachmann bought 4,000 votes. That's admitted. And so Ron Paul lost by, well, some estimates are 216, others 152. But the point is there's also hundreds and hundreds of votes that came up missing. And then you add to that Bachmann bought thousands of the tickets, actually paid people, something Ron Paul did not do. Ron Paul told his supporters to come there and buy tickets if they believed in him, and that's all part of the straw polls to show who has the interest. But clearly with all of her money and establishment backing the former IRS attack dog enforcer who supports secret arrest of citizens and secret execution of Americans, hey, if you like her, well, why not like Joseph Stalin? I know she's a lot cuter than Ron Paul, but and I know Rick Perry's got better hair than Ron Paul, but, well, the point is when I come back from break, I'm going to start my engines and go over all of this today. Also in financial news, why is George Soros selling gold and buying farmland? That's up on Infowars.com from Mike Adams at Natural News. We have a lot of other bizarre information, like Krugman calls on government to manufacture war to save economy. And it was a very bizarre, for those that aren't informed, statement by Krugman. We're going to play that clip coming up. Amidst alien invasion rant, many missed the point that New York Times economist was advocating a staged crisis. So we're going to be going over that as well. Rick Perry has changed his mind on HPV executive order that killed so many people in Maine, so many others. Well, he's a day late and a dollar short on that one, isn't he? I put a video out this weekend on it titled, Rick Perry Hurt Little Girls. I should have said killed, but he definitely hurt them. There's no doubting that. When he knew it was killing people. We'll be right back. The mainstream media admitting that they are ignoring Ron Paul and running scared from him. We'll get into all the latest military news, U.S. and NATO arming Syrian opposition. We knew that months ago, but now it's confirmed. Planning military strike. Big victories by Muammar Gaddafi now 4 months into fighting U.S. and NATO-backed al-Qaeda forces. Of course, you know, Friday, the federal government working with the state and city government out in San Francisco, shut down cell phones in much of the city to, quote, block a peaceful protest. Even the Associated Press is calling this Orwellian. Today, Kurt Nimmo had the first big report out on it Friday and then again Sunday. Anonymous announces BART cyber attack after cell phone shutdown. That is all coming up as well. But I also want to talk today about positive things that are happening. And I'm going to do that at the start of the second hour. And in fact, I'm going to write a note here, positive things. Because as bad as a lot of things are in this world, it always takes things getting bad before people decide to rediscover liberty. And before the average man or woman decides to get up off their rumpus and to believe in themselves and to believe that they can affect change. It takes tyranny to get people to start valuing liberty. See, we go in cycles, and the Founding Fathers talked a lot about this. Many historians have talked about it, that you become decadent because your society is wealthy, then corruption comes in, then hardcore corruption sets in, then tyranny gets into place, and then people struggle against it and regain their liberty and value it, and then incredible prosperity begins again, and then slowly corruption creeps back in, the prosperity goes away, the freedom goes away, tyranny comes in, the people stand up again, and then once they have liberty and once people are moral, then the blessings of freedom come back, the prosperity comes back, and then the children and grandchildren become decadent again, and the cycle continues itself over and over and over again. So I'm going to be talking about some of the positive things that are going on in this world when we start the second hour today. By the way, in the last month, I've had radio station managers and owners call us. And this has been happening for years. And they say, yeah, we just got the Arbitron ratings, or we just got the instant people meter systems that are even better. We do even better on those because it's not just off establishment, long-term name recognition and laziness, people just filling out the diaries. There's a system in the car that you agree to put in that actually tracks what you're listening to. Genesis is a great network. Ted Anderson is a wonderful person. He never censors me, never tells me what to do. And we've been successful because we're not establishment radio by the book. But over the years, little bitty stations outside big markets, because the big monopolies, there's only really two big companies own most of the big stations in cities. So even if you get good ratings and huge listenerships, you usually can't get on those big marquee stations because the syndicators also own these stations. One of the big names, obviously, is Clear Channel. And so over the years, we'll go on stations, say 500-watt, 1,000-watt stations outside cities like Knoxville is one example. And a station will go from almost no ratings to a year later doubling, a year after that quadrupling in the time slot I'm in. Big audience for little bitty stations. WBCR is an example. But then over the years, I've been able to get on big stations in big cities. But it's always the same. The station owner or manager calls up and says, yeah, I got this from the local station, or I got this from another network, but just thought I wanted to let you know how high your ratings are. But the way Arbitron and instant people meters work, if you're not subscribing to it until it gets published in a newspaper, you're not supposed to talk about it. And so it is a big, dirty secret in talk radio that everywhere I'm put in a market, even on a smaller station, I will defeat everyone. And I just got in the last month, 2 different stations that came in. One of them is in a top 20 market. Up against Rush Limbaugh, one station went from, number 6 to number 1. Number 1. I was on the station 2 months, and in 2 months, the station went from way down the rankings to number 1 against Rush Limbaugh. And I'm just going to have Ted get with the ad agencies and get the numbers ourselves, because Ted's a great guy, but I'm even doing this on air so that it becomes a larger issue, so that we actually act like a radio network and get the ratings, and the fact that that's the holy grail of talk radio. It's the holy grail of radio. That you have a talk show host that you can take and put on a smaller station, and in a matter of months go from nowhere to #1. That is the holy grail of talk radio. And that's the reason that Talk Radio Network, the second biggest network out there, records my show every single day and has it sent to executives. I have that from Inside Talk Radio Network. They syndicate folks like Savage and others. The truth is, I will dominate and I will beat and I will annihilate in the ratings anybody that I go up against if I can be put in the NASCAR. I can take the junkiest car on the track with the least amount of money in it every time. If you let me on the track, if you put me on the track, I will dominate. But I have to be allowed on the track. And basically what happens is, for 15, 16 years, I've been winning every time I'm let on the track. And the establishment is all fully aware of this, and the radio executives and consultants are all aware of it. But it's a big secret. And Genesis just can't sit there and count on the fact that this is known in the industry. We have to get this information to the radio stations in the markets out there so that I can reach more people and we can try to save this country. There's no doubt if I was on 650 radio stations like Rush Limbaugh, we would turn this country around in 1 month. There's absolutely no doubt of it. And I just start thinking back over the years. When I was on KJFK here in Austin, back when it was talk radio, they were paying $300,000 a year. You have to pay to get Howard Stern on. One of the only shows you have to actually pay for. The others you all share radio spots with them, network and local spots. They were paying $300,000-something. I forget the exact numbers, over $300,000 to him. Plus he got part of the commercials. And in '96, they put me on a Saturday night, and 6 months later, it was one of the highest-rated shows in that slot, #1 in talk radio. It was beaten by the music. Some of the books came out later, and I was beating everything in town. #1, not just in 1 or 2 key demographics, but across the board. So they said, well, we better put you on Sunday, too, since people like you. Then we'll give you a weeknight show, 7 to 9 o'clock. And when I wasn't preempted by sports, we shot up very high, #2, #3, every book and every demographic. And here I was in many demographics beating Howard Stern, who was on in the morning. Now, then the 2 radio guys had left to go on to better pastures, who had hired me at that station from watching me on Access TV. And they brought in some guys who never really worked much in radio, and they got very upset by my ratings. They got very threatened by it. And basically said, you're going to stop talking bad about the government or you're fired. And I said, I can't do that. So they fired me, I don't know, it was 6 weeks later or so, and really enjoyed themselves and said, you're out of radio, ha, ha, ha. And I laughed at them. I said, I'm doing a show already from my house at ISDN on more than 10 stations. They said, no, you're not, you liar. You're not on the radio. And I've always had to deal with this, that I don't exist and that I don't dominate and that we're not #1. I am #1. And you put me up against anybody on a frequency even half as powerful, within 6 months to a year, I will be #1, period, anywhere you put me on the radio. And you know why? Because people, even if they're dumbed down, have good instincts, good guts. And anybody listening to this radio show, in your gut, knows I'm absolutely 100% hardcore real, and there's no teleprompters here, and I believe exactly what I say, and I do what I say I'm going to do. And that's what people want. And it's a parallel to Ron Paul. He's #1 in New Hampshire, #2 in the Iowa straw poll, winning all the other major scientific polls, #1, #2, or #3. Has massive support. Every political analyst that's been honest has said for 2 years he's the only guy that can beat Barack Obama. The Republican leadership is a complete joke. And what happened last Friday after he won the debate, hands down, in Iowa? Totally dominated it. Had the people standing ovations. The talk show questioners, the host of the show were attacking Paul. All the other political hyenas were attacking the lion out there. And everybody saw it. And so what happened Friday? all the big neocon talk show hosts came out and literally attacked Ron Paul and said he was basically the devil and would destroy America. When they're the people that ensured that mainline rhinos who are for carbon taxes, big government, all these wars, torture, into the Bill of Rights, warrantless wiretapping, you guys have made sure that they stayed in power and that there was no real challenger to Barack Obama so he could get in power. And here's Ron Paul, right about everything across the board, never compromised, the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And here you are, coming out and going after him, joining CNN and others, saying Ron Paul can't win, putting out that false mantra. It's the same thing. You give Ron Paul a fair shake, you line him up with the rest of the horses, he will absolutely stomp every one of them into the ground, just like I will. Because it's not Ron Paul, it's not Alex Jones. It's the message of liberty. You know, nobody out there. I'm going to finish up talking about talk radio, and then I'm going to come back and get into all the news, and then give the number out to take your calls. But nobody out there in talk radio wants to go up against Rush Limbaugh. I didn't want to go up against Rush Limbaugh. I wasn't even thinking about Rush Limbaugh 14 years ago when Ted Anderson said, you're doing this nighttime show on my little radio network, but wouldn't you like to do a daytime show 11 to 2? And I said, isn't that Rush Limbaugh's slot? And he said, yeah, but there's some smaller stations out there that, you know, that can't get him on their station. So why don't you fill that slot? And I said, okay, I'll do it. And so for a couple of years, I did the nighttime show and the daytime show 6 hours a day. But the daytime show did grow to be a lot bigger. So here we are many years later. So I never looked to challenge Rush Limbaugh. I never thought magically that if I was in Rush Limbaugh's slot, I would beat him when I had a chance to be put on the field with him. And I don't have a hatred for Rush Limbaugh. I think Rush Limbaugh was a gateway. I remember being in high school and college and listening to him and agreeing in the principles of liberty and freedom and the Second Amendment and national sovereignty. But I grew out of Limbaugh very, very quickly. I learned that environmentalists aren't wackos. They're hardcore banker-run consolidators to sell everyone on guilt so that we'll give up our liberty, our freedom, our private property. I learned that big mega corporations were behind the environmental movement to control government and then have government shut down their competition so only they could operate. They were monopoly men. And so I'm not up here going, woo-hoo, you know, anywhere they put me up against Limbaugh, I absolutely, completely dominate him. And Ted, by the way, has now gotten those numbers. They're going to put a press release out on it soon. And it's not the first time this has happened. Anytime I put in the same market with Rush Limbaugh, I will take stations that aren't even showing up in the ratings, and I will take the show to #1. It normally takes 6 months to a year. I've done it in a major market in 2 stinking months. And you know why? You know why? Because they've put in the instant people meters that actually show who's being listened to. And it's a lot harder to game those. And here's my problem with Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh talks all day about the free market, but he doesn't talk about how the mega Federal Reserve that he supports and defends over the years is a giant monopoly over the issuance of currency and credit. He doesn't talk about how he works for a group that tries to set up radio monopolies to actually shut out competition. The truth is, I will absolutely defeat Rush Limbaugh anytime they let me in the ring with him. Okay? He can wear brass knuckles. I'll wear gloves. I will clean the floor with him. You can tie one of my arms behind my back, literally, and give him a baseball bat. I will destroy him. Now, I don't want to destroy Rush Limbaugh. He's already done a pretty good job of that. Taking so many pills, he went deaf. That's what that Oxycontin does. That guy's a cyborg. I feel sorry for him. I want to get America back. I want my republic back. I want my Bill of Rights and Constitution back. That's what I want. I could care less at the end of the day to say, man, I'm the most hard-hitting, hardcore truly cutting-edge radio host that's hit this country in decades. You think I like that? No, I don't like the responsibility of having to get up here and realize millions of people are listening to me. This is a mission. This is not entertainment. This is not about being a big personality. This isn't about living in $30 million houses or flying around on private jets. This is about defending the republic from enemies, foreign and domestic. And I remember multiple top radio executives a decade ago and 7 years ago, always the same speech. Alex, do you want to go on this crusade that's leading nowhere, or do you want to be a star? Be a mainline Republican. Join us. You'll get a TV show. You'll have the book deals. You'll have it all. And all those execs know it. All those big networks know it. They couldn't believe that they couldn't buy me for 30 pieces of silver. What is 30 pieces of silver worth if you don't have a country or a Second Amendment? And if a bureaucrat can come to your house and boss you around or take your children for no reason. In fact, I didn't even have a choice. There's no choice at all. What would it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? You know that parable? You go to somebody and say, I'll give you $1 million to give me your eyes. No way, no way. Well, why would you take $1 million to sell who you are, to sell your soul? Huh? See, I can't be bought, and I can't be threatened, and people know it. And I'm only an example how we're taking this country back. You know, I like the fact that I'm an underdog. I like the fact that I crawled up from nowhere. I didn't have some giant defense contractor 25 years ago when AM radio was completely dying get behind me and pay to get me on dozens of stations to get ratings and then expand talk radio across the nation. Oh, and make no mistake, it was major defense contractors and Rush Limbaugh that saved AM radio. AM radio would not even exist today as we know it if it wasn't for Rush Limbaugh. So let's give him his due. And this is something that's in the way, way back burner of my brain. The fact that any time I'm put up against Rush Limbaugh or anybody else, I absolutely dominate them. People are like, well, then give us these ratings numbers. Let me explain to you talk radio. Whenever Ted wants to get the ratings, he has to go out to the big consortiums and pay to see them. Do you think the TV networks just get to see the Nielsen ratings for nothing? You think Nielsen does that for free? Goes out and gathers that data? No, you have to pay for it, and a hefty sum. Ted just came in my ear during the break, and he said, yes, we were already on that. We already have the numbers. I got a bunch of cities for you. Well, then, why isn't my show being promoted? Because I talk about 9/11 being an inside job? Because I'm not some candy-ass libertarian show? Excuse me. Because I'm not a coward? I'm Mike Tyson in his prime. Put me in the ring. I will rip these people to shreds. Fist and elbows. They're going down because I want liberty. That's why I'm fighting, is for my family. I know how real this is. I'm not fighting for a big ego. I'm not fighting to go to these stupid radio conventions and everybody kiss my hind end. I'm a recluse. I want to be left alone. That's why I'm out of the gates. That's why I came out of my cave. Because I want to be left alone. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm angry. I don't want to be here. I got up at 6 a.m. and took my children fishing. I almost called in and canceled the show today. I'm out there with a French bulldog and my 3 children. I'm catching bass and catching sun perch and trying to catch catfish. Boy, I had a big one right up there, almost caught him, but broke the line. That's what I want to be doing, not hanging around with rich people in New York or Los Angeles or showboating around with people. You can ask anybody in my office. I might go to a movie every couple of months with a crew or something, but I'm not out hanging out. I'm not out trying to hang out with the people and act cool and be seen. I want my freedom. I want my freedom. And I want the globalist off my back. I'm a free man. I don't want to be a slave on a global plantation. Now, I'm going to get into the news, and then a wide open phone, second and third hour today. No guests, because I want to talk to you. But my brain just starts burning with the data and the information that in a consolidated talk radio system with one giant oligopoly of corporations, two different groups operating together to own the stations, own the hosts, keep people out, do whatever they can, that any time there's a crack in the door, and there's been dozens of these cases, I absolutely just wipe the walls with these people. Now, here's the good news, and I said I'd give you a bunch of good news next hour. Here's some good news, just one little piece of good news out of a cornucopia of good things. I listen to mainline neocon talk radio now, nighttime, morning, weekend, and they talk about global government and the ultra-rich and how the ultra-rich use monopolies and use government to shut down their competition. That was not on radio 2 years ago. The only place you'll ever on big radio hear anybody talk about the New World Order or such issues was George Noory. And he took that show in the right direction. He deserves a lot of credit. He did that 7, 8 years ago. Big change. And if you got to say somebody really opened the door to allow some of these topics to be discussed, it was George Noory. At the end of the day, he deserves more credit than I do, having people like me on. And the system thinks it's safe to let him do that because he covers the waterfront. But the point is, truth is contagious. And the truth is, if George Noory did a purely political show during the middle of the day, he'd beat Rush Limbaugh. The truth is, people are sick of the rhino establishment parroting the same message over and over and over again. And it's not just that it's the same old, distorted, fraudulent message. The same type message we get from the Democrats is a different flavor. It's still Kool-Aid at the end of the day, with cyanide in it, politically. It's not just that it's boring, it's killing this country. It's destroying this constitutional republic. So the good news is, you can pull the clip up. 2 years ago, Rush Limbaugh was forced to come out and say, I've always been a water carrier for the Republicans establishment, and I'm not doing it anymore. He had some kind of pang of conscience, and you could hear it in his voice. And now what's he doing? He's carrying the water. I saw a video clip, and I forgot to send it to Jaron. It was, it's in Paul Watson's article from Saturday. What's the headline? Forget the hoax. Ron Paul is a presidential frontrunner. And in that is a clip of Limbaugh in his studio. Looks like his home studio, not the regular one. And he's talking horrible about Ron Paul and has genuine hatred of him. And then he turns to the television and he says, there he is, in front of the ice cream stand in Iowa. And goes, this is just great. It's funny because I'd seen that same day, I guess later in the afternoon, Ron Paul in front of the ice cream stand where they were interviewing people at the Iowa straw poll. And it was that hatred that he had. That's why you never hear me come out and bash Rush Limbaugh and talk about how he's a drug addict, pill head, synthetic heroin head, and all the rest of it. Because you know what? At the end of the day, I don't like just hating on other media personalities. But to see his hatred of Ron Paul, to see him demonize Ron Paul, to see him say Ron Paul can't win, it'll destroy the Republican Party. Hey, Rush, if people like Ron Paul don't get into power in this country, America's over, buddy boy. Ron Paul has laid out everything that was going to happen with total precision. And it's archetypal that he's the man of the hour right now and is the real front runner who could unify this country and kick the globalist out of here at great risk to his own life. And you sit there selling the establishment line. You know, it's not just mainline radio talk show hosts that now talk about the New World Order and the Federal Reserve because they have to, because of this show and others and the internet, just to stay pertinent, to even stay in the game, to stay relevant. It was people like Newt Gingrich, who wrote the foreword to Alvin and Heidi Toffler's books, 2 of them, where he openly calls for world government and the end of the United States. Go pull up the quotes. A guy that supports carbon taxes. A guy that was sent in there to sabotage, like Boehner's doing, the true conservative libertarian revolution of 1994. A total CFR globalist, picked by the CFR to run for Congress decades ago because he wrote books totally calling for world government. And what did Newt Gingrich say? Well, we shouldn't abolish the Fed, but oh yes, I do want it audited. And just a few years ago, he fought auditing it publicly. And Ron Paul turned to him and he said, I am so glad that the mainstream is starting to join me. See, that's what's happening. We're winning. They're bleeding out. And so what do? They sit up there like a bunch of demonic parrots in a tree saying the same thing over and over again. There is no world government. There is no global banking cartel, but there is, and they're going to fix things with a global VAT tax that Bill O'Reilly pushes. And Ron Paul can't win. Ron Paul can't win. Did I tell you Ron Paul can't win? And I can't tell you how many local talk show hosts and national I hear say, I like Ron Paul, but too bad he can't win. That is a mind game that they developed to treat you like you're a 3-year-old. It's like an ice cream truck goes by, and your child hears the ice cream truck music, and you tell the 3-year-old, they're out of ice cream, honey, they're going home. And the 3-year-old goes, oh, there's no ice cream. It's like a lie you tell a baby so they don't throw a fit. Oh, you hear the ice cream truck, but he's out of ice cream, honey, maybe sometime down the road. It is that they treat you like brain-damaged children. Are you brain-damaged children? Or does it anger you to have these people sit up there and play their psychological warfare games on you? You know, the minute you're aware of their playbook, all their games don't work anymore. The minute you're aware of their scams, it's game over. Now, I don't get up here like a cheerleader or like a football coach who really thinks my team is going to lose. But I tell you, you can win because I just don't want you to be embarrassed too bad. If I didn't know, not think, know historically from deep research and in my spirit, in my gut, and intellectually, that not only can we stop the globalists, we can defeat them and build an incredible civilization together. Our greatest days are ahead of us if we wake up out of this television culture of death-induced trance. This 501c3, it's the end of the world, Jesus is coming back, government-financed rapture cult. If we can get past all that garbage, and if you New Agers stop thinking that Nibiru, planet Turkey's going to kill us, if you stop having this defeatist attitude and start believing in yourselves, we could turn this civilization around. And if you're Christians out there, don't give me, oh no, it's Scripture. If my people will humble themselves and repent, then I will free them. I mean, you know all those verses, right? What about Nineveh? Jonah going to Nineveh, the 100-year reprieve. And even if it is the end of the world, even if the planet Keebler, Elf, is coming to get us, you still need to stand up against evil and not use it as an excuse to stand down and lay down and not fight corruption. The globalists are not all powerful. They realize the individual has incredible power when you have knowledge, when you have truth, and when you have the will and the courage to execute an operation against the technocrats. I crawled up literally from nowhere. That's why it's an establishment mantra that I'm establishment, and I'm backed by people when it's a complete fraud. Because they don't want you to believe that you can affect change. They don't want you to believe that you have power. I'm somebody, ladies and gentlemen, who was going to community college and about to go to the University of Texas and figured out it was all a big joke and a game, and that they were teaching me RTF information from a decade before that was worthless. So I went down and did an Access television show. I found a place, and it took me over a decade to get to where we are now. Think of where we'll be in a few years. We're growing exponentially. And it's the same example of where we came with Ron Paul. Ron Paul, 30 years ago, was a voice in the libertarian wilderness. But the system was so scared of him that they tried to get him to join them, just like they tried to get one of his colleagues to join them. His name, you may have heard of it, is Alan Greenspan, who wrote books against the New World Order, the world government, and the Federal Reserve, and called for a gold currency. Now, When he was in Congress 16, 17 years ago, Ron Paul couldn't get one co-sponsor for his End the Fed legislation. Last year it passed the House. They used the corrupt Senate to kill it. They're so scared now that they're going to be able to pass it in the House and Senate as the economy implodes and as the people recognize who was behind this, that they've now fraudulently set up a super Congress for the interim so that Rand Paul can't introduce legislation to get rid of the Fed or audit it. And so Ron Paul can't, he can't introduce that now, technically, because of the super Congress. But you're like, oh, well, see, they're tyrants. Yes, and we force them to uncloak. To use a cheesy Star Trek analogy, we force the Klingon vessel to uncloak to fire. They uncloaked. There they are. I mean, you think in a fight you're just going to go up and win the first punch? You have to make the enemy show themselves. You have to run up against them to expose their weaknesses. You have to run up against them so they can smash you. And so others see you being smashed and have courage to stand up. You see, I don't believe that if I'm destroyed, that's going to scare people. That's going to cause people to see the fact that I stood up and resisted these people. That's going to cause you to rise up. See, people think I'm here trying to scare folks. It's the opposite. I'm coming from my truthful perspective, how I see things. And when somebody tells me about tyranny and proves that somebody wants to enslave my family and take my liberty and my property and my freedom and my destiny, I get angry and want to fight them. So I treat you like you're Alex Jones. I imagine you're just like I am, red-blooded. And I come to you and I don't mince words and I tell you what's going on and I show you the proof. And I break it down for you in the belief and in the heartfelt conviction that when you finally wake up out of your trance and face what you're dealing with, that you'll decide on the only course that's available. Because these globalists aren't giving us quarter. They're not just trying to enslave us. The enslavement is a means to an end. They want to exterminate us in every one of their seminal documents. Foundational, in every one of their canons, in every one of their tomes. And see, that's the one thing they have on us, is that good people tend to be blind to evil. It took me over a decade to really believe the globalist own statements. It took me a long time to really face just how wicked and evil these people are. It took me a very, very long time to even be able to deal with this myself and to realize there's no future if I don't fully commit myself to this and have no fear. I have no fear of being killed or being destroyed or being imprisoned or tortured or lied about, my character assassinated. I only have fear that I will not live up to the challenge, that I will fail you and my family. Because there is no future if we don't beat these people. And it's the minute you realize that, it is the second that that light bulb goes off in your heart, your soul, your intellect, your spirit. It's the minute that you decide to not play mind games with yourself. And, oh, it's not that bad. Oh, whatever. Oh, some of what that guy says is true. And, yeah, a lot of it's come true, but I just can't believe it's that bad. The minute you stop being in denial, the minute you stop being a 3-year-old psychologically. See, 3-year-olds think they can change reality by imagining. The minute you understand you're not going to get out of this, none of us are going to get out of this unless we face just how serious the threat is. Was it Patrick Henry said? We'll try to pull up the quote. I would know the truth no matter how bad and make preparation for it. Now, when we come back, I haven't even gotten to the news yet. Incredible economic news. The mainstream media admits they're targeting Ron Paul, demonizing him, and trying to ignore him. Rick Perry news. It's all coming up. And your phone calls. Stay with us. I'm wound up. I've been ranting for 54 minutes. I apologize. I actually don't hate Rush Limbaugh. It upsets me to see him turned into just a complete vassal of the New World Order and so pathetic. And to see him over the years promote mandatory drug sentencing for young people caught with heroin or cocaine, that the military-industrial complex ships in publicly, and then to still call for mandatory sentencing even though he's been caught with synthetic heroin. And I don't think he should get in trouble for his drug addiction problems. It's an addiction. It's a problem. But even after that, spot checking and listening, he still promotes mandatory drug war garbage. I mean, that is one evil piece of garbage right there. I'm sorry. That is just a sold-out blob of pus. All his money, all his power, getting off drug charges, you know, doctor shopping over and over again. But he wants some 16-year-old kid caught with drugs to be thrown under the jail, so that then that person comes out of prison, a hardcore criminal with 4 to 5 to 7 to 10 years of criminal education. You know, the media is all over the place saying, why is the gangster culture the new culture? Why are there so many kids raping and robbing and killing all over the Western world? Because Sumner Redstone and MTV and Hollywood sold it? And because kids that go to public schools get beat up by the gang members, so they join them out of fear? I didn't join them. I beat the living daylights out of them when I grew up in Dallas, but I was the exception. Most people got into it. There's a bunch of reports on that I'll get to later. Yes, America's culture is a prison culture. What do you think you learn at prison? How to be in the Aryan nations, how to be in the black group, the Hispanic groups. And what do the young middle-class kids learn how to do? They learn how to be punks. They grow up and MTV says you wear your pants down over your hind end to signify that the intelligentsia of this country is a sexual toy for someone with HIV in prison. That's what a sick joke America is in Europe, and that's the yuppie parents that are even bigger sick jokes, teaching their kids to go ahead and go along with it. Parents saying, oh, that's too cool for you. That's too old for you. You can't dress like a prostitute when you're 10. You can't dress like a punk in a prison when you're 12. Instead of telling your kids, that's a psychological warfare television. That's a system there to destroy you and make you weak. You tell your kids that, they'll listen to you. But you act like a bunch of chicken neck parents out there. You wonder why you've lost your children? Because you're not men and you're not women. You're a bunch of TV heads that repeat whatever's programmed into you. And it's time to break it. Time to break your conditioning right now. We got a lot of hope, but you got to get angry first. You got to get focused. You can't say, oh, the world's too corrupt. I just give up. That's the end of it. You've got to believe that we can make this a better place, and you've got to get aggressive, and you've got to have confidence. This is what happens when I take off 2 days in a row. I actually had a weekend. I actually got some sleep. I did do a lot of work, as you noticed on the websites, but all right, you might want to know what the news is. We're going to come back and get into it. Establishment media admits conspiracy to ignore Ron Paul. Can't make that up. PrisonPlanet.com. Got the CNN clip where they admit it. Reuters elite edits Iowa poll. Reality, according to globalist agenda. They don't even mention Ron Paul. Neither does Politico. Bachmann rigged Iowa poll by buying at least 4,000 votes. But we don't need Ron Paul, who's an actual constitutionalist. We want the IRS attack dog. And don't worry, you'll probably get her. You like somebody who's cutesy. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.